Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most provocative, poetic, and, let's be real, historically significant texts ever written. We're talking about Friedrich Nietzsche's masterpiece, Thus Spake Zarathustra. Now, this book has a bit of a reputation for being dense and incredibly complex, but don't worry, we're going to break down its core themes into a clear, logical flow. We'll explore all those radical ideas Nietzsche presents through his prophet-like character, Zarathustra. All right, let's just jump right in.
So, picture this. After 10 years of total isolation up in the mountains, Zarathustra decides it's time to come down and share his wisdom with humanity. And on his way down, he runs into this old saint who is still singing hymns, just praising God in the forest. When they finally part ways, Zarathustra says to himself, could it be possible this old saint in the forest has not yet heard the news that God is dead? Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand what this means in the context of the story. It's not just some edgy provocation. It represents a profound crisis of meaning. The text is setting the stage here by claiming that the foundational, absolute truths humanity has relied on for centuries, they've completely collapsed.
Which leads to the big question, right? And I'll ask you this directly. If those old values are gone, what comes next? Without a universal moral compass just handed down to us from above, how do we avoid falling into total despair or just complete nihilism? This question is literally the engine that drives the entire narrative. The rest of the text we're unpacking today is essentially Zarathustra's grand, highly poetic attempts to answer this exact dilemma. Since the old ultimate goal is gone, Zarathustra steps right into the town marketplace to announce a radical, totally new goal for humanity to strive toward.
Section 1. Zarathustra and the Superman.
So Zarathustra tells the crowd, man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, a rope over an abyss. It's a wildly vivid metaphor, isn't it? The text is presenting humanity not as some triumphant final destination, but as a transitional, dangerous, and really precarious bridge. We are not the end of the line. According to Zarathustra, the true greatness of humanity is that we are an overgoing. We're just a phase that needs to be surpassed.
But surpassed by what exactly? Well, by the Superman, or if you prefer the original German, the Ubermensch. The text presents the Superman as the ultimate goal for humanity. Unlike those old values that kept everyone looking up to the heavens, the Superman is deeply rooted right here. He is the meaning of the earth. And Zarathustra uses these striking metaphors, calling the Superman the lightning and the madness needed to wake humanity up from its complacency. It represents the ultimate overcoming of our current limitations to create entirely new earthbound values. But, as you might guess, Zarathustra quickly realizes the crowd just isn't getting it. They're totally lost. So he pivots. He tries a different tactic and shifts his focus from the ultimate goal to a really sharp, vivid warning about the ultimate trap.
Section 2. Beware the last man.
So here's the contrast. On one side, we have the striving, creative, lightning strike of the Superman. On the exact opposite side, the text introduces its antithesis, the last man. Zarathustra describes the last man as this creature who literally only seeks warmth, comfort, and safety. They completely avoid danger, they dodge great passions, and they try to make everything as small and manageable as possible. They are, for all intents and purposes, the ultimate manifestation of societal complacency.
We have discovered happiness, say the last men, and they blink. You can just hear the biting sarcasm in Zarathustra's observation there, right? The text essentially compares this existence to a flea, an ineradicable, comfortable little species that just hops around, blinking in this mild, drug-induced haze of average contentment. And it really asks us to reflect. Does our modern relentless pursuit of easy comfort and risk-free living kind of mirror this last man existence? Well, shockingly to Zarathustra, the crowd actually cheers and begs to be turned into these last men. Having completely failed to awaken the crowd in the marketplace, Zarathustra realizes he has to change his whole approach. He needs to speak only to those who are actually willing to do the hard internal work. Because reaching one's highest potential, that requires a very specific and very difficult internal transformation.
Which brings us to Section 3, the three metamorphoses.
Chapter 1 introduces these three metamorphoses. The text pivots here to give us what is arguably the most practical, relatable framework for self-development found in the entire book. It lays out exactly how the human spirit has to evolve in order to create those new values.
Okay, so the crucial journey is laid out in three distinct steps. First up, the spirit becomes a camel. Picture a camel kneeling down,
wanting to be heavily loaded with societal rules, traditions, and the heavy burdens of thou shalt. It builds its strength through endurance and carrying the weight of the past. But out in the loneliest desert, the camel transforms into step 2, the lion. Now the lion craves freedom. It violently rebels against the great dragon of thou shalt, fiercely declaring instead, I will. But here's the catch. The lion can only destroy old values. It doesn't have the capacity to create new ones. For that, the lion has to undergo the final metamorphosis into step 3, the child. The text describes the child as pure innocence, a game, a self-rolling wheel, and a sacred yes to life. The child is finally capable of purely creating fresh, new values from scratch. But to reach that ultimate state of the child, the text argues we first have to stop looking away from the reality of our own physical existence.
Section 4. Reclaiming Body and Earth. Here's where the text takes a really definitive swing at traditional philosophy and religion. Zarathustra introduces a group he calls the afterworldly. The narrative argues that heavenly ideals and other realms were actually invented by the sick and decaying. According to the text, those who suffer greatly and simply cannot cope with the physical world, they invent an afterworld as a way to escape the pain of the earth. They end up despising the physical body because, to them, it's nothing but a source of suffering. To counter all of that, Zarathustra preaches the wisdom of the body. He famously declares, "Body am I entirely and nothing more." The text brilliantly flips traditional philosophy completely on its head. Usually philosophy elevates the pure, rational mind way above the messy physical body. But Zarathustra argues that the body itself is a great wisdom. He actually claims that what we call the mind, or the ego, is merely a small instrument, a little toy, operated by the true mighty ruler called the self, which dwells in and literally is the physical body. And this deep, intense connection to the visceral, physical reality of life bleeds right into Chapter 7, Reading and Writing. This is where Zarathustra demands that we engage with truths passionately. He challenges readers to write with blood, stating that blood is spirit. He also urges us to kill what he calls the spirit of gravity, and get this, not with anger, but with laughter and dancing. Learning, in the context of this text, is absolutely not some dry academic exercise. It is an act of fierce, joyful passion. But of course, as we cultivate this inner strength, we inevitably face external threats. Section 5. Escaping the Cold Monster. Before exploring the text's sharpest anti-institutional claims, it lays some important groundwork in Chapter 10, War and Warriors. Now, it's super important to clarify here that this is urging a metaphorical war of ideas. Zarathustra is demanding intellectual bravery. He urges his followers to actively seek out their best enemies and wage war for their thoughts, valuing conflict and intellectual victory way over peaceful, stagnant complacency. And this intellectual warfare is necessary precisely because of the state. The text views the government as the coldest of all cold monsters. Zarathustra claims it is fundamentally built on a massive lie, the lie that says, I, the state, am the people. The narrative frames the state as this mechanical trap that's entirely designed to swallow up the superfluous masses, chewing them up and destroying any sense of true individual culture. Remember that crisis of meaning from earlier when God was declared dead? Well, the text argues that the state steps right in as the false replacement, a new idol designed to seduce the masses. It basically buys the luster of your virtue, offering wealth, education, and power, but at the terrible cost of your true self. The text goes so far as to claim it's a slow suicide disguised as life, one that demands human sacrifice just to maintain its power. So, what's the remedy to all this? The text offers this ultimate piece of advice. Flee, my friend, into your solitude. I see you deafened with the noise of the great men, and stung all over with the stings of the little ones. Zarathustra is practically begging the true creators to leave the noisy, performative actors behind in the marketplace. True clarity, real creation, and the birth of new values can only happen when you get far away from the suffocating influence of the state and the herd. Zarathustra makes this beautiful promise that the earth is yet free for great souls. So the whole structure is laid out right before us. From recognizing the collapse of old values, to avoiding the trap of the complacent last man, to undergoing those heavy metamorphoses of the spirit, and finally, escaping the cold monster of the state. The big question left hanging in the air for you to ponder is this: will you remain in the noise of the marketplace, or will you dare to build the bridge to the Superman? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating explainer with me today.